Rokt helps retailers make more of every transaction. When someone is already buying online or in-app, Rokt makes it possible to show relevant ads and offer content in that moment, like subscriptions, upgrades, or loyalty perks. So instead of interruptive advertising, customers see something more useful and more timely. For retailers, that creates more value from the transaction. For customers, it creates a better experience. That's Rokt, making every transaction more valuable. On today's flight of the Retail Pilot, I am fortunate to be joined by Joe Kudla, founder and CEO of Vuori, the performance apparel brand inspired by the active coastal California lifestyle. Raised near Seattle, he studied accounting at the University of San Diego before working as both a CPA and a fashion model, experiences that gave him a unique lens on business and product. After two early entrepreneurial attempts in apparel and a very successful startup in the financial space, he launched Vuori in 2015 from a Southern California garage, focused on premium fabrics, everyday versatility, and understated style. Under his leadership, Vuori has grown into a $1 billion plus global brand with a reputation for quality, community, and a modern approach to wellness and performance. Joe, welcome to the Retail Pilot.
Thank you, Ken. Excited to be here.
You come highly recommended by our mutual friend, Simeon Siegel. So I said, all right, Simeon, I'll do a podcast with Joe.
Simeon's fantastic. I've loved getting to know him over the years.
He is like just one of the best guys out there. Honestly, love him.
He's a bright mind, and he really understands the retail business. I've really enjoyed pontificating on our space and where things are going. And, we shared some philosophy early on kind of, why a DTC brand would enter wholesale and things like that.
Yeah, I often tap him when I have questions on where the industry is going, what the challenges are, and also what the opportunities are. He's my go-to guy.
Yeah.
When I was listening to a couple of different podcasts, and one thing that really struck me as very interesting in your background is growing up, challenges in school, and the role your mom played to help you overcome those challenges and keep you on track. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think, I was told by a lot of teachers that I had learning disabilities, pretty severe ones. And, this is in the early days. There wasn't a lot of prescribed medications available, but, there was a recommendation that my mom look into that. She was always averse to it. She wanted to stay natural and take the harder path. And I'm just so grateful for that. But yeah, at one point, I think a teacher pulled my mom aside and said that Joe is probably not destined for school. She was like, I think she told my mom that I should start looking into different trades. And that was at a pretty young age to peg me for somebody that couldn't excel in school because, while, I had a really hard time focusing, I couldn't sit still in class. I was a little dyslexic, so it was really hard for me to read and retain what I read. So school was really hard for me, but my mom would sit with me for hours and hours after school. She would help me get through my homework. She would make sure my book reports were done and turned in. And, she always told me that like one day things would click and that I was smart, but that the way my brain worked was just different. And it was just, I remember having so many days that I just felt like I was stupid. Like I just couldn't, like it just didn't connect for me. And I just wanted to be outside playing sports and running around. And sure enough, like by the time I had graduated high school, it did start to click. And I went on to college and I almost had a 4.0 GPA in college. And I set the bar in a lot of my classes and, numbers and math and analytical things came really effortless to me, and writing and literature came really effortless. So it was just like, I learned differently. And I'm just so grateful. I tell my mom every day, there's no way I'd be here without her.
I did a podcast with Lou Frankfurt, the former coach CEO, and Lou, growing up, had pretty much the exact same experience. His teachers and the headmaster at his school told his mother that he was destined for the trade business and they ought to be looking at another way for him to go rather than stay in school. So it must be something about being an entrepreneur where you just sometimes the road early on isn't that easy and it has a lot of challenges, but there's something to it where as an entrepreneur, you stick with it, you find a way to make it work and you come out of it.
Yeah. And I think also like what I've learned is, I'd probably had a classic ADD diagnosis or ADHD. And what I've learned about myself is that if I'm not interested in something, I have a really hard time comprehending it or just, but when I'm interested in something, it's like actually a superpower. Like I can go I get so overly focused and can go so deep into a topic and I'm able to juggle multiple balls at once. And so, yeah, I think entrepreneurship was the right career path for someone with my brain.
As I mentioned in the bio, you did some modeling, paid some bills with that. You were a CPA, and then you also started two different apparel companies, neither of which turned out to be successful, but both provided you a view into a business that ultimately you decided to go after. But before jumping back into the apparel space, you had a super successful venture. Tell us a little bit about that and what was the turning point that got you to exit what was working really well in your life and go back into the apparel space?
Yeah, it was like that itch that I just couldn't scratch. And, it goes back to, my upbringing playing sports. I never nurtured a creative bone in my body. I never took an art class. I never thought that while I was intrigued by brands and design, I never thought like that was my calling because I didn't think of myself as an artist or a creative. Um, but when I went to work in Milan and did those years modeling, I just fell in love with watching designers build product. And I realized that I had a passion for product. And I loved how they told stories and how they brought these collections to life. So that was incredibly inspiring to me. And I thought that was the aha moment where I was like, maybe there's a creative in there somewhere. And the truth is, like now, like a little bit older and wiser, I believe that everybody is a creative. Like we're all creative beings. Like we just have to get in touch with it. Um, and so yeah, I started my career at Ernst and Young, did a couple years in finance, started those brands as you had mentioned that didn't go anywhere, and that was like a death to me, like really feeling like that was my calling and my passion, but just not being able to put it together. And I didn't grow up with um, a lot of like material wealth in my family, rich in love and values and just I grew up in an incredible family, but material wealth was not one of them. And, it was an interesting contrast because I grew up in Bellevue when Microsoft was blossoming and there was just money all around. Like, I played on sports teams with people that came from very wealthy families and they would vacation. And so I think like I felt like I wanted that for myself. I wanted to experience it. And that's another thing I've learned about myself. I want to experience everything that life has to offer from, the bottom of the ocean to the top of the highest mountain. I'm like, I love the experiencing. So I wanted to experience what it would be like to be successful as a business person. Um, and so I started this financial consulting company called Vaco San Diego. It was two partners and I. We started the San Diego practice for a firm that was starting to grow in the Southeast, and we started the San Diego practice, and we just built an awesome company. Like we went into a space that was largely margins had been eroded. It was like, mostly it was very competitive on cost. And we took a relationship and a community approach and we built an awesome company. And we had hundreds of employees. We were at one point, I think, the third fastest growing private company in San Diego. And it was awesome until it wasn't. And it was so exciting and rewarding to realize that like, yeah, this kid who came from like very humble beginnings could actually start a business and, have some financial independence. Like that was incredibly inspiring to me. But after about 8 years, I realized like that creative itch was still there. It was still present. And I just wasn't passionate about showing up every day. And if anything that's been maybe the biggest gift for me in my life and my path is like I have an acute awareness that my life is short and like and it's not going to be very long until I'm on that deathbed, hopefully surrounded by people I love, and I can intuit what it's going to feel like to be sitting there. And I just didn't want to look back and be like, yeah, I wanted this so bad, but I never really jumped in with 2 feet. Like I always did it on the side. I did it out of the garage. Like I never really expressed myself creatively. And so that was incredibly motivating for me. And eventually I just said, I this is something I have to do. And there's a lot more to that story, but that's kind of where I'll pause.
So you decide you're going to make a move. You're going to go into the apparel space where you weren't the most successful. What does your mom, what does your dad say at the time that you're leaving this success story and going back to a space that didn't pan out for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people thought I was insane, you know? And, it was like a culmination of so many factors, but, I was so fortunate, to be raised in a family that always prioritized the experience over a destination. And my parents, my mom was a therapist and a spiritual teacher and coach. My dad was one of the first kind of licensed acupuncturists and naturopathic doctors in Washington. He was way ahead of his time in terms of new age of health and wellness. And it was always about like learning and growing. Like that was the value. So it was disconnected from an outcome. And I was not living in alignment with my family values as I was out in the world pursuing things and wanting to go and learn and chart my own path. And as I had kind of gone through some tough times, the business is failing. I'd gone through a divorce. I was just unhappy in this career that I thought was everything that I had wanted. And so, my parents were actually really supportive because, like, for them, it was like, if this is in your heart, like this is your path. Go walk it, But if you're gonna do it, go all in, like it was like don't half-ass it. Like go all in if this is really calling to you. And it took me a lot of courage to face that decision and to make that call. I didn't do it on a whim, it took a lot of processing, but ultimately, I decided that if I was going to do it and follow this path, which to me was so clear in my mind, like the vision for Vuori was so clear. I couldn't do it out of the garage or with 1 foot in and 1 foot in another world. Like entrepreneurship is just too difficult. There will be too many exit ramps. And, if you have any inclination to take those exit ramps, you'll take them. So I just knew I needed to go all in.
And unlike the prior two endeavors where you were working you had a day job and were trying to launch a brand, you decided this is what I'm going to do and I'm going to be the best at it. Talk to us a little bit about the vision, the white space that you saw for Viore that got you so excited and that was pulling you out of bed every day.
Yeah, it was like really a culmination of a lot of factors, but we live in Southern California on the beach, and I'm from Seattle where it rained, a lot of the year growing up. And I watched Baywatch on TV. I was fascinated by this Southern California lifestyle, tan skin, exercising, being outside, 365 days a year. It was just very aspirational to me. And when I moved down here, I learned how to surf and I was in the ocean every day. And quickly started to understand and really be inspired by this kind of more West Coast casual aesthetic. But it's really interesting because like people come to California and this is the place where dreams are made. This is like the center of Silicon Valley and the tech industry. Los Angeles is where people come to become stars and to follow their dreams. But California has this kind of understated, casual, more like Zen-like approach to realizing your dreams. That was always incredibly fascinating to me. These two opposing forces at work. And as I was going through a lot in my life, I dealt with a lot of back pain. I started practicing yoga. And, being an analytical person and having an accounting background, I quickly started to understand that this was a massive market. I mean, there were 30 million people practicing yoga in the United States. 30% of them were men. Men's was the fastest growing demographic. There's a lot of people practicing yoga. If you had 8 million men practicing yoga, there's only 4 million people that surf in the United States. And so inherently we're like 2x the size of surfing. And there's so many surf brands. So that was one data point that went into it, is just like the men's yoga market was being underserved. The second thing was that fitness and living an active, healthy lifestyle was becoming pop culture. It was like after work, instead of going to happy hours, which is like what people did in my 20s, people were like going to Soul Cycle class and meeting up at Equinox or going to CrossFit. And fitness was becoming about community. It was community. It was social. And you saw brands that were really rising up and servicing women, but the men's market was so underserved. And, as I was in yoga studios every day, I was practicing yoga, I was going to the gym, I was seeing firsthand the evolution of, people caring more and more about what they wore to the gym, what they wore to class, because it was becoming social and it was becoming integrated into your everyday life. It was no longer this separate thing that we did. It was like, no, you might hit a class or go to a yoga class, hit the gym before work, and then you're on with your day. And I didn't think that there was a brand that was addressing this for men's. So it was that awareness combined with the fact that in Southern California, this more casual, laid back aesthetic wasn't being reflected in activewear and anything technical. You had like casual lifestyle brands, and then you had like men's sports brands, activewear brands that had a very defined look. It was big logos, shiny synthetic materials. It was product that you would wear to the gym or wear to compete in a sport, but you would want to change out of right afterwards. It didn't have an aesthetic, a tactile sensibility that you just wanted to live in. So it was like all of these things coming together to create a vision for a brand that could build ultra premium product that men could move and sweat in, but had an aesthetic and a tactile sensibility that you wanted to live in and wear in all day life. It was more about life infrastructure and all day wearability versus product you just wanted to change out of after you worked out.
I heard you say somewhere, and I don't know if this was your phrase, a marketing phrase, or where you got the phrase, but you wanted to build product that was kissed by the sun and washed by the ocean.
Yeah, I think, that's true. And that was really probably around our point of view on color. Because like, again, in the men's market, we were just seeing like primary colors dominating the activewear market, like bright blues, bright yellows, neons. And we were like, no, like in Southern California, we want again more understated approach to product. We were more inspired by brands like James Purse that were doing, these like washed down neutrals and like washed brights that kind of looked like you took a bright and left it out in the sun for a couple days. And like that's where Vuori likes to play.
Timing, this is around 2014-ish that you're starting to form the company.
Yeah, late 2013, 2014.
And how challenging are you finding it to raise money based on, if nothing else, your background and the challenges that you'd had prior launching a retail or apparel company?
I mean, it was almost impossible. And this is like before the era of cheap capital. We lived through it because a lot of it was offered to us as we got some traction. But back in 2013, people weren't just like writing checks and throwing money at consumer brands. It was a very challenging time. And, like you said, I was 0 for 2 in the apparel space. I had started a financial consulting practice, but that, doesn't necessarily relate to clothing. And everybody knows how difficult clothing was. What was interesting, as I reflect on a lot of the calls that I had, is that everybody was looking for a hook. And this is the era of like Warby Parker and Casper and, like the early D2C pioneers. And so there was interest in companies that had a D2C proposition. Um, but we didn't necessarily look at our business that way, even though it was like very much on trend to be a pure play D2C brand. we didn't actually think that that was the right strategy for Vuori. And we didn't have some kind of customer acquisition hook or some kind of tech enabled distribution strategy. We were like, no, we have a vision for product, and we have a vision for culture, and we have a vision for, how we're going to treat customers and, build a community. And like that stuff was a little bit old fashioned and, maybe a little out of vogue at the time. And so we struggled to raise money. It was very, very hard.
But you raised 400,000 from friends and family. You were able to bring on 2 key employees who are still with you today, build out a brand. Actually, I think you launched a store, within, like, a year after you formed the company. 2016, you opened up in Encinitas, which is, like, really early. I mean, with all these others that you mentioned, so many D2C darlings were online only. No one believed that you needed stores. And then
Yeah.
you also got a great break with REI.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about what happened.
So I want to unpack what you said just very quickly because like to a listener, it might sound like, we opened a store and it was easy to do so. And I just want to share because it's such an important part of our story. Like, so we started in a garage, and one of our early investors was a close friend of mine, had bought a building. He was going to redevelop it, and he was going to put a bank there. And it was this old consignment furniture store. And he said, "You guys can use this space." So we went in there. We literally did all the work ourselves, and we turned this 3,000 square foot little store not on the prime location for retail at all. And we turned it into a community center. And what I mean by community center is like we took a third of it and we officed out of it, so we wouldn't have any office expenses. We took a third of it and we created an art gallery, and we took a third of it and we tried to fill it with merchandise. So it was tough to do, but we brought in some friends, brands, and things, and we started hosting art shows and fitness classes, and we would meet there to go on beach runs, and we started building a community around the brand. And if it wasn't for that pop up, I don't know if we would have been in the retail business. But we didn't open our first store because we thought it was a way. I mean, ultimately, we knew it would be a way to reach customers. But the driving force behind opening that first store and signing that first lease, which was frightening in 2016, is it was a step function from opening this pop up and realizing and experiencing the power of community building and bringing people together. And we just realized like when we couldn't be in that pop-up anymore, we had to have a physical space. Like this was our destiny. We didn't know the first thing about how to operate a retail store. And like our first, in 2016, when we opened that first store, it was 2,400 feet, but half of it, again, we devoted to an art gallery and like showcasing the work of all of our friends and photographers and artists and people that we just thought were incredibly talented. And so I just wanted to share that little journey to opening our first store because it wasn't easy. It came with, yes, a lot of risk, but we made a lot of sacrifices to make it happen. Like we had to get really creative, and we moved our office actually from the pop-up space into the back stock area of our first store. So again, it was retail store, it was office, it was art gallery. I mean, we were stretching to make it work, but it was cool and it was different, and I don't think we'd be here if it wasn't for those early decisions.
Yeah, there's something to be said for working in the store or having your office in the store. I think my first job, well, second job out of college, I went to Macy's training program, and then when I was an assistant buyer at Macy's, but as a buyer at Macy's, like, you're working above the store, so you could go down on the floor, you could see the product, you could interact with customers, get feedback from associates. It really kept you connected to product.
Yeah.
And without being in the store, if I wasn't there, I don't know how I would have had that experience, or I could go down and just get that jolt of adrenaline, like on a Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock, see people coming into the store and buying. I loved it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you brought
Super
up such a
cool.
good point. Like, just the number of things that I heard just through the wall, from where I sat. It was incredibly connected to the customer. So that's a great point.
Shortly thereafter, or maybe about the same time, you got a big break with REI. They luckily found or connected to your product through someone who was wearing Vuori, and the buyer said, "What is that? We need it." And that grew to be a pretty big business in and of itself. Was wholesale part of the early thought process in terms of how you were going to reach the customer?
It was, going back to those days, we watched Lululemon build their business largely direct in stores, but they always embraced selling to small gyms and yoga studios and being in places where people were using their product for the intended use. And then what we realized through, a lot of these yoga studios that I was practicing at, Core Power Yoga and Yoga Works, even gyms like Equinox, where, some of these chains had 100 locations. And so just between those three, you're looking at a number of doors that could be like 250 locations, and each of them had little studios, or little kind of retail presence where you could buy the latest cool little cottage industry activewear brands. And so when we launched, we always knew that we would embrace that channel, because we needed to be in a place where people would put our product to the test. They would move in it, they would sweat in it. um, we realized quickly that it was very challenging to sell men's product in a lot of those channels. Um, but if you looked at the more mature retail market, like Nordstrom and even REI, up until we got that break, they weren't assorting this type of product on their floor. Like premium men's athleisure wasn't a category. So if anything, a
Sounds
lot of
like an
these
oxymoron, right?
yeah, a lot of these buyers were just trying to figure out, how do we address the Lululemon challenge? Like, that Lululemon was so successful at the time, they were like, how do we speak to the female consumer that's wearing Lululemon? Like, what can we do to solve that? Men's was like, we'll think about men's way down the road. It wasn't even a part of culture yet. So it was challenging. Like, we got a lot of no's. We embraced the small gyms and studios, but we didn't know if we could build this business at wholesale, because, like, every time we talked to a buyer, they would just say, we're not ready, or, we don't really have like a place on our floor for this kind of category. We sell a little bit of Nike and a little Under Armour, but at that price, like, I don't think we could sell it. And we wanted to blur the lines between performance and life. So it was always even a question of, like, where would I put it? Does it sit over there with lifestyle clothing, or does it sit over there with the activewear? And that was like inherently the opportunity and the beauty. And that was the vision of what we saw, was merging those two worlds, but it didn't formulaically fit into the box. So we were just a little bit of ahead of our time, until we weren't.
And you were not only ahead of your time in terms of what you were trying to address with product, but the fact that you were profitable within 2 years. I think that 2017, you were actually profitable.
We were.
That's
But,
amazing.
we were
Unlike
profitable
your
with an office in the back stock of a retail store, and I mean, we were scrappy. We were doing a lot with a little. But yeah, we did get profitable. We had to, because I wasn't great at raising money, and, the market was just different for capital then. And as soon as we realized that we could do this, and we could build a working capital model that could self-fund our growth, then the idea of raising more capital was really more about the competitive landscape and trying to get to scale faster than our competitors. But we felt that wasn't we didn't want to take that path. We wanted to grow at the right cadence and rhythm to build an enduring, long-term sustainable brand. And so that's the path we took.
2018, you launched women's. And then in 2019, you did go out for your first big round and raised 45 million for Norwest. What did you do with the capital?
So this is like a common misunderstanding when people look at Vuori's, the capital that we've raised. So, you know, in 2013, we raised our first friends and family money. And so by 2019, those investors had been in for a while. And so we wanted to provide an opportunity to give them a return. And the company was generating healthy EBITDA. We were growing top line very dynamically. And so we brought in Norwest as a way to provide a return to our early shareholders. So the money actually didn't go to the company's balance sheet. The money went to investors. And that's like, what we did again with SoftBank in 2021, and then again what we did with General Atlantic and Stripes. And so, we've raised over $1.2 billion on behalf of our shareholders, but none of that money went to the company's balance sheet. So really, if you think about it, um, it's kind of crazy to think about actually, but we built the business that we've built today with over 100 retail stores. We sell in over 30 countries. We have over 3,000 employees. And we've done this with about $2 million that we put on the balance sheet.
That's incredible. And I'm sure you have a lot of happy early investors that had not only a great ride, but a really financially successful ride.
We've had the best investors. They've been patient. They've been supportive. It's almost like they're co-founders. I have the best group of investors because they all are just so proud and so vested in what we're doing. And so I'm really blessed in that way.
Joe, talk to us a little bit more about business today, where you are today. You just talked about over 100 stores. You have your international, e-commerce, wholesale. How would you break out the business just as a percentage? D2C, wholesale today, where does it stand?
Yeah, our wholesale business is, sub 20% of the business, and the rest of the business is direct. And, it's give or take evenly split between retail and e-commerce. Um, our retail business is growing fast, and it's something that we're investing a lot of energy in as a brand. We are incredibly proud of our retail business, and it's not because people use the word experiential retail, and I love going to New York and seeing the flagship that's got the rock climbing wall in it, or the vintage Porsche as you pull in, and that's all beautiful. Like for us, retail has been about, incredible service, beautiful presentation of our products. We want people to feel the essence of the brand, which is about clarity and effortlessness. We want people to feel that. We want them to feel this kind of coastal Southern California environment as you enter the store. So it's about the feeling that people have. It's about the service. It's about building authentic relationships with our customers. And we believe that we make really exceptional product. I mean, our number one value as a company is to make great product. Number two is being in great relationships. But we think that stores really deliver on both. They're an opportunity for people to touch and feel what makes Vuori so unique. Um, and then obviously an opportunity to build really strong relationships with our team. And so we love our stores, and it is one of the big driving forces of growth, where we sit today.
You opened up a store in my neighborhood a few weeks ago on 66th or 67th and 3rd. So, I'm able to kind of bop between Vuori, Alo, and Lulu, compare and contrast. And what I would say is that, and you hit on this, Vuori has a really approachable store. And there is a lifestyle and a vibe that cuts through the imagery, the product, the space that you actually have to shop. The way the product is laid out really does set you apart from the competition. I think Lululemon, they're having a whole host of challenges, but one of their greatest challenges is their store presentation. It's dated. They need to dump a lot of money into the store and get the product right. And on the other extreme, I think Aloe, feels very staged in terms of the way the product is laid out. It's very color coordinated. It's much more about fashion than it is for me about function and about feeling athletic, which works for a certain customer, not necessarily for me. But I love what you're doing in the stores. They look great. The people, they've got their heads up. They want to help you. Everybody there feels like they're a problem solver and they're excited to be there. So whoever's leading the store team is doing a great job because I always feel that energy, regardless of which Vuori store I walk into.
Catherine will love hearing that. I'll make sure I relay that to her. But I agree. And it's always, look, like we aren't naive. We're not naive. We understand that as we grow, we have over 100 stores now in the U.S. and we're growing at a pretty fast clip, but never out in front of where we feel we can maintain that level of service. We have some of the highest NPS scores in our category, and it's actually not even it's not close. Like based on the benchmarks we look at, the levels of service when you look at on average across the country is something that it truly sets Vuori apart. And so I really genuinely love hearing that. And I hope that that's not just because we're sitting here talking. Like we put so much energy and intention into that experience. And it's not just like training at retail. It's about culture at large, like it's about the culture in our executive board meetings. It's about the culture and how we lead our teams every day here at HQ. And it's about how that and living in alignment and working in alignment with a value system that people trust and believe in ultimately diffuses down organically into every touch point in the business. And so, retail is like the best signal for the health of our culture. If it starts slipping, it means something is probably slipping here with us at HQ that we need to be in tune with. So we spend a lot of time and we focus a lot on how people are feeling about that store experience.
I've been into a number of stores and the experience is really consistent. So you're doing something right there. The culture is definitely moving through the stores, you feel it, and I don't feel that in a lot of other stores. In fact, many other retailers I feel are just completely void of culture. And I think, being part of a movement is important to a customer. It's the community that you talked about. One thing I did want to ask you, and one of the things I was very attracted to when I became a Vuori customer is your logo. And I guess my question for you is to V or not to V? Because I love the V. When I first saw the V logo, I said, "What is that?" And it was sort of like it goes back to I was a tennis player growing up, and I'll never forget when I was watching whether it was Nastase or Jimmy Connors, and they were wearing like it was a Circle T logo, and I was like, "What is that?" And then you found out it was an ST, it was Sergio Tacchini, or when Alessi just came out with that cool color half moon and said, "What is that? That's cool." And it's sort of like if you know, you know. And I see you're putting some other labels and logos on the product, but I just got to say, Joe, I'm a big fan of the V, and it's like if you know, you know, and I love it. I don't know what the plan is or what gets the V. How do you determine what gets the V versus what gets the spelled out version?
So this is it's a big topic of conversation, and a lot of people ask this question, and I think it's like a general philosophy on, building, this brand. And ultimately it was a personal choice that we made. Like I love the V1, so if you look at that logo, it's actually a V and a one combined. And Vuori is all about, wanting to feel your best on the journey of life. And the one is kind of symbolic for being your personal best, showing up in your personal, the version of yourself that is the best for you every day. And I love that logo too. Vuori is a multi-dimensional brand, and we're not one thing. We're not just a fitness brand. We've existed to kind of blur the lines between fitness and life. And so you have cohorts of customers that love Vuori for fitness. It's like it's what they wear to the gym. We have cohorts of customers that wear Vuori to the office, and they perceive us as an office, work leisure brand. We have people that wear us to travel and vacation. We have some people that just love wearing us around the house. And, we use a set of core brand marks. It's the Vuori word mark and the V1. Sometimes it's in a patch label. Sometimes the word mark is in a kind of little Foresight So Natural label. Sometimes it's reflective. And, we've always felt that gives the product more range, and we let the fabric, being such a fabric-led company, we let the fabric and the silhouette inform which garment that we use. And I acknowledge that's a trade-off, between brand recognition. When you see that repetitive single logo used over and over again, that can help with kind of identity and brand recognition. But the positives to doing it our way is more brand durability. I believe more strong product desire, because your logo is more like the garment is telling you which logo application to use. It's broader appeal and it's less trend risk. Like brands that become known for that one logo, it becomes one identity. And yeah, that there's a strength and a power in that, but there's also risk as the world changes. And so I think Vuori can exist in this place similar to how Nike does it, or brands like
Mhm.
Montclair. I mean, there's a number of brands that use multiple applications of their logo, and those have always been inspiring to us.
Today, the business roughly is over $1 billion and still growing. The valuation last I read was somewhere north of $5 billion. As you look out to the next 12, 24 months, maybe there's an IPO hovering out there. We won't talk much about that. I'm sure you can't. I'll just think about it. But what do you do to continue the growth? Where is that going to come from in the next 12 and 24 months?
I mean, there's product expansion, although we're trying to be very disciplined in the categories that we enter, because our primary goal is to build trust and to reinforce our core positioning. But there's product expansion, um, and then there's distribution. And like when you look at our distribution strategy, we just have an incredible opportunity to reach people with our vertical retail stores, which have become little mini community hubs. I mean, the story I shared with you in the early days in the pop-up and our first store, we've carried that thread through to every store we open, and we have intentional community strategies that are operated through every store. Um, so we'll continue to open stores, and then we're just getting started on our international journey, which is so exciting. Like this product that originally we were just trying to solve a problem for people in our hometown, this little beach community in Encinitas. And today, you go to mainland China or you go to Korea and you see customers wearing Vuori and talking about the rise, the shine, and living a life of balance and wanting to feel sense of purpose and joy on the journey of life. And it's just a beautiful thing. It's such a beautiful thing, and we have a really incredible opportunity ahead of us to grow the brand. And Asia, where today we have just under 10 stores, and seeing incredible growth and opportunity, um, and then in Europe as well. So it's really an exciting time, and I think there's going to be a lot of growth ahead for the brand.
To help fuel that growth, you've also focused a fair amount on the social piece of the business, on influencers. You also get involved, and I've heard off the record from someone that actually when Joe appears wearing product, those are some of the best performing, whether they're Instagram posts, social posts, or what have you. But Joe, you can move the product like no one else. But how are you looking at influencers? How are you looking at celebrities or athletes as part of the future of Viore?
Um, It's a great question. And I think a lot of people are curious about this question that have followed our journey, because Vuori was really built organically. I always say from the inside out, from the heart of the company outwards, like great culture, great product, great community, great service. And like the rest is kind of taking care of itself. Of course, supported with strong performance marketing. We embraced digital advertising kind of early in like the evolution of Facebook and Instagram's ad manager and all that stuff. Um, but we were like a slow fog. And it's funny, actually, the head of marketing at Yeti, who I love, told me, he goes, what's so beautiful about Viore is he's like, you guys are like a slow fog building across the country. You've never like, had a celebrity with a microphone, trying to build awareness. He shared his story with me about how he got to know Viore. And it was because our team in Austin out of our store made his CrossFit coach feel like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like they embraced a relationship with him. He was a part of our team in Austin, and he was proud of the brand and he was proud of the relationship. And so he wore it and he evangelized it in his local community. And this was like 20 minutes outside Austin in a small town. Um, and that is a beautiful story. And that has been largely how we've gotten to where we're at today. But, as you pointed out, like we're on a growth journey. We're expanding beyond the US. International markets are becoming more important to our future. And so we need to build awareness in a new way. And so we are starting to work with a number of partners, and you named celebrities. There's also athletes like Jack Draper is a tennis player that we just signed. We're really proud of that and excited about what we're going to build with him. And then, we've had kind of organic relationships like the Gerber family, Randy Gerber and Cindy Crawford invested in Vuori early, and we've always just been very close with them. They've been incredible support system for us. And so we formalized a partnership with their family, and Kaya has been wonderful. And then we recently did a deal with Tom Holland. So we're starting to work with more celebrities, but it's not about their celebrity for celebrity's sake. It's about reinforcing the core essence of our brand and our values and the rise, the shine. And we're looking for, I envision like our partnership kind of family of partners to be like a dinner table where you don't want everybody to have the same backgrounds and be talking about the same stuff. You want to learn and grow from each other, but you want to have a common set of values that bring us together. And that's really how I'm thinking about it. But excited to continue to bring our ideology and our brand to the world through partners that can help us do that.
One sport that I'm totally obsessed with right now is padel or paddle. I mean, it is like, honestly, I almost canceled the podcast because there's a game I'll play it tomorrow. But I mean, we're crazed. I mean, crazed people, and a lot of the guys love the core short. The core short is like the go-to short. But there's a market out there, and it's the fastest growing sport globally right now. But and no one's really claimed it. It's kind of tough to claim, but no one's really going out there and taking that sport on. And I think that is just, you know, armchair quarterback here, but I think that's a real opportunity out there.
I 100% agree. I love the game. Unfortunately, I have a bad back, so I have to be careful with how much I play, but I love the game. And, we've done a lot to support paddle tournaments in Los Angeles. Tom Holland has an annual paddle tournament for his non-alcoholic beer company. We always support that paddle tournament. We've hosted some of our own paddle events. So we're definitely in tune with it. And I 100% agree. I feel like Vuori it's a natural fit for our brand. And, I think about it as like racket sports in general. Um, if you A lot of people, even when pickleball was, booming culturally, it was like a lot of pickleball players, instead of going all in on pickleball, they were inspired by the leaders in racket sports,
Mhm.
Carlos Alcaraz, guys like Jack Draper. And so demonstrating that your product works effectively for tennis, um, in some respects has a natural kind of correlation to paddle and pickleball.
It Well, listen, I'd love an invite to come to your padel or paddle event, whatever you're calling it. I'll go to either. I'm available and on with low notice as well. Before we close out, I just want to talk to you a little bit about your leadership style. I mean, it comes through how passionate you are about what you do. It probably doesn't even feel like work is work. You just love it so much. How would your team describe you as a leader?
I would hope that above all, they would say that Joe is mostly focused on, doing meaningful work, irrespective of who gets the credit. I would say that hopefully they would say that I lead with humility, that I try to cultivate a culture where great ideas can come from any level in the organization. Um, I would hope that they would say that I lead by example with passion and devotion to doing incredible work, that I believe strongly in the vision and have a strong vision for, where this business is going and what the opportunity looks like. Um, and that I wanna create a place that I wanna show up to every day. Like, you know, this journey was largely a rejection of the financial path, and it's turned out to be fantastic and on all fronts. But Vuori, but when I started this business, it was coming from a realization that I wanted to do what I loved every day. Like I wanted to come to the office and be devoted to doing something with purpose and all those things. It wasn't about making money. And so for me, I prioritize our culture. We have a no asshole policy. I'm looking for like wildly talented people that lead with humility, that want to build thriving teams, and create ultimately a place that we all cherish and all want to come to every day. Because that's what it's ultimately all about.
Well, you picked a great leader in Ashley Kechter. She's terrific. I've known her for a number of years, so good choice there. I'm sure along with many other good choices because you just don't grow this business without having a great team. If you look at your calendar on a given day, what's the one meeting that you hope shows up?
Anything related to product. So, I love our material meetings. I still sit in on like raw material meetings once a week to understand the status of new innovations and testing and products and fabrics that we're excited to bring to market. Vuori is a fabric first, so everything we do is we engineer our whole go to market around fabric as the number one priority. So we never design into a product and then try to go find a fabric on the open market. We always start with fabric that's approved, tested, and we let that inform what gets made. So we inevitably never compromise on quality. And so fabric is incredibly important to me. And then anything related to, fit and design, like I just love the tactile sensibility of what we're making, how it fits, how it moves on the body. So anything related to product.
Do you have anything to do with how the product fits, Joe?
I'm sure you've heard.
I have. That's
Yeah.
why I'm throwing up a softball.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm still the fit model
There
after
we
all these
go.
years. Won't give it up.
That's how you got to profitability so quickly. I know it.
That's
Um,
right.
from a leadership perspective, it's been a challenging couple of years for retail in general. How did you handle the first hit of tariffs, the hit to costs going up, and what was your direction to the team around how to manage margin and retail, what to pass on to the consumer, what you were going to eat, and how to work with partners as well to try to absorb some of those costs?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first overarching message was don't panic, that we're going to get through this, and that that ultimately we needed to stay focused on what we could control. And I think that's just kind of goes with all leaders would probably echo a similar sentiment. But that was very much true for us. And we approached it in a number of ways. We went out and did a study of the market, and we wanted to create a committee that was like in tune with competitive pricing and understanding where the market was going. We created a team that was more focused on the supply chain and getting out in front of our vendors. Like we had a team that spent a lot of time in country working alongside all of our biggest partners to see what was possible on the sourcing front. And it was the one mandate was never cut corners. Like the idea of like working with a substandard material or changing our trims or the construction of our garments was totally non-negotiable, off the table. So it had to come from thoughtful partnership with our suppliers. And so we went down to not just tier one, but tier two, tier three suppliers, trying to understand how they could share in what we were going through and experiencing. And, we ultimately made a decision that we weren't going to try to protect margin as a percentage, but rather try to get as close to protecting the dollars as we could. So it was dilutive to the P&L, but ultimately, you know, it was kind of like we were going to take a little bit of a hit. We were going to pass some of it as much, as little as we could to the consumer, but a little bit. And then we were going to have our vendors sharing it as well. So it was all like almost like dividing it into thirds.
I mean, that really calls on a leader to be able to see the right direction that you need to take during a challenging time, because it definitely threw a lot of planning organizations. It wreaked havoc. I mean, it created such a challenge for sourcing teams and a lot of pivoting and moving, and it's still going on today. But I like the approach that you've taken. Let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsor, Leap, the retail as a service platform that lets modern brands launch and scale brick and mortar with far less cost, risk, and complexity. I know many of my listeners are thinking about or already in the process of opening retail locations, but the lease, build out, and hiring feel impossible. Leap handles everything from site selection and real estate to design, build out, staffing, and daily operations across 110 plus locations for over 55 brands in 13 U.S. markets. Brands like Bombas, Faraday, Frankie's Bikinis, and Ring Concierge have used Leap to run their retail, and with operational heavy lifting off their plate, they open faster, perform stronger, and scale further. If you're ready to go physical, visit leapinc.com to schedule a call and explore what a Leap partnership could look like for your brand. Let's end with some quick rapid-fire questions before I let you go. What's one daily habit or routine you're most committed to right now?
Moving my body.
First job you ever had and what it taught you that you still use today?
My first job was actually working at a screen printer, and I would fold T-shirts as they came off the drying, out of the dryer. So, what did it teach me? I think just about hard work. And if you're going to do anything, think of it as a devotion to something bigger. It's not just about the task at hand. There's always a bigger reason for everything we do. And so, think of our work as a devotion to something bigger.
Favorite streamed show?
Oh man, probably that I've watched in the last couple of years, probably The Last Dance.
If you weren't building Vuori, what do you think you'd be doing professionally?
I think I might be a naturopathic doctor, like following in my dad's footsteps. I'm obsessed with the body's natural ability to heal itself.
Last question. One piece of advice you wish you had 25 years ago?
I would say be guided in life by how you want to feel, get clear on purpose, which for many of us is a pretty simple concept, and that is to learn and grow. That if your sole focus is on an outcome or achieving some goal, even if you hit it, it's not going to feel that great for very long. And so if you can shift your orientation more towards how you want to feel as you move through life and do things that nurture that feeling, ultimately you're going to attract all the outward stuff that you could ever want. But bringing a slightly different perspective to how we go out and pursue our goals, I think is so important.
And with that, we'll land this flight of the Retail Pilot. Joe, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to hear your story, where you're taking the company, and how well the team is doing to get you there.
Thank you, Ken. It was a pleasure, man. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's flight of the Retail Pilot. And please give us a review on your favorite podcast platform.